Hello, and welcome to my talk entitled Are You Thinking What I'm Thinking? Perspective Taking in a Language Game, which is on a project I did as part of my master's dissertation at the University of Edinburgh with Kenny Smith, and I'm currently a PhD student at Aarhus University. So, to start off with, perspective taking in this case refers to what I have to do if I want to draw your attention to something that's very salient and accessible to me, but not necessarily very salient and accessible to you. So I have to kind of model your mental state in order to tailor my utterance to your knowledge or lack thereof and your worldview. So to take an example, Albert and Beatrice discuss a heated debate between Caleb and David that they've both been following on Twitter. They agree that Caleb is right and David is wrong. The next day, Beatrice sees new evidence and arguments come to light and changes her mind. Beatrice texts Albert, "Whoa, Caleb is making a fool of himself on Twitter." She succeeds in taking Albert's perspective into account because she remembers that to him, David will probably still be in the wrong and not Caleb. If she had said, "Whoa, he's making a fool of himself on Twitter," Albert would have assumed she meant David, who they previously agreed was in the wrong. So there are many theories about how people use perspective taking in communication, ranging from almost exclusively, where this is most of what we rely on to achieve success in communication, to almost not at all, where we just use it for repair when communication fails, and the rest of the time we kind of rely on perspectives being aligned through repeated interactions and taking advantage of the common ground, etc. But what we wanted to do was to investigate perspective taking as a mechanism on its own without the opportunity to use any of these other things. And we did this through a language game, which was very similar to one deployed by Sleek and Lukian in 2 papers in 2018. But first, I'll explain what the language game was about. So we have 2 participants sitting in separate booths. They can't see each other or interact except through these networked computers. They take turns giving and receiving clue words to guess target words. They can always only type in one word as a clue word and one word as a guess, and then they both get feedback after each trial. So first I have an example of a case where perspective taking didn't go so well. Here the target word is heart, and the director enters the clue word love, because that's very salient for them when they see the word heart. The problem is that heart is not the first thing the matcher thinks about when they hear the clue word love. Instead, they type in hate, and then they're both told the guess was hate, but the target word was heart. In this case, the director didn't take the matcher's perspective into account. Instead, what they could have done would be to type in the clue word cardiovascular, which, while very low down on the list of associates you think about when you hear the word heart, has a very high backward association strength, which I'll get back to in a second, which means it's very likely to elicit the word heart from the matcher's perspective. As we can see here, the matcher sees the clue word cardiovascular and enters heart, and then they're both told that was correct. So there were a number of things that we had to take into account when designing these experiments. We conducted 2 experiments as part of this study. First, perspectives have to differ. So you can have a target word like day, but day is most likely to elicit the clue word night. That's the first thing you think about when you hear the word day. But also the first thing you think about when you hear the word night is mostly day. So they are each other's top associates, which means that you could get a correct trial from just saying the first thing that comes into your own mind and not necessarily taking perspective. Instead, we have to compare this with asymmetric trials, where with a target word like dolphin, for example, the first thing most people think about when they hear dolphin is mammal, but the first thing most people think about when they hear mammal is not dolphin, it's animal. So in this case, the director would really have to take perspective in order to succeed on the trial. In the first experiment, we had half symmetric trials and half asymmetric trials. Also, we have to be able to measure perspective taking somehow. So as with the previous example, forward association strength is when the director sees the target word and the first thing they think about is X. So this is the probability of the clue given the target, or the probability of love given heart, for example, which is very high. But the real measure of perspective taking is backward association strength. So the probability of the target given the clue, the probability that the clue will elicit the target from the matcher. So for the previous example, love was a kind of poor clue word for heart, because the probability of heart given love is lower than the probability of heart given cardiovascular. So if they went by backward association strength, they should choose cardiovascular instead. We took both these symmetry measures and the association strength measures from the Small World of Words, which is a huge database of word association strength norms. Also, thirdly, we have to restrict other ways of succeeding if we want to investigate perspective taking on its own. So we did this by making sure that participants didn't know each other and they were unable to interact throughout the game, and no target words repeated. So they were unable to take advantage of their interaction history to succeed. We recruited 40 participants for experiment 1, playing as 20 dyads, and 40 participants for experiment 2, again playing as 20 dyads. We recruited all of them from the University of Edinburgh, and they had to go through 120 target words, and they were able to use as much time as they wanted to type in the clue word and type in the guess word, which took approximately 1 hour, and then they took turns being director and matcher. So what did we find? Here we see our two main measures. On figure A, it's average success over rounds. They played 6 rounds. And on figure B, we see average director backward association strength, also over rounds. The thick black line is the average over all the dyads, and then all the colored lines are individual dyads. As we can see here, they don't really improve over time, even though they get around a third of them right, which is kind of impressive when you think about that this could be any word in the English language. They don't seem to learn that perspective taking is a good strategy, or the only strategy that you can use. We did find, as a kind of sanity check, that symmetric target words were much easier to get than asymmetric target words, kind of twice as easy to get, which indicates that it was the perspective taking that was the challenging part. And also, words that had good clue words were easier to get than words that didn't have good clue words. So, for example, a target word like department doesn't really have a good clue word. The best one is bureau, with a probability of 0.02, while a target word like EYE, has a good clue word in retina with a probability of 0.33 of listing it. So this also seems to indicate that they were looking for good clue words, and just kind of the search part was what was difficult. And we also looked at other measures like clue rank of all the clues. What was the rank of the clue they gave? Forward association strength, which should go down. Ratio between optimal clue and the clue given. But there was nothing really going on there either. You can read about all of those measures in the paper if you want. So we were kind of puzzled by this. So experiment 2, we tried to make it as easy as possible to get the perspective taking strategy up and running. So we gave them richer feedback and easier targets, and also all of the target words were asymmetric in experiment 2, because we are worried that if you could sometimes get away with just using your own perspective, then you wouldn't really try to use perspective taking to get the target words right. So also all the target words had good clue words in this case. So it was always possible to find a good clue word, a clue word that strongly cued the target word. So it's just a question of finding it. And the richer feedback looked like this. If the target word was door and the clue was opening, the matcher guessed aperture, then they were both told from opening, most people guessed door. So in that case, it was actually a kind of a good clue word. But an even better one would have been hinge. So what did we find? Same kind of a graph as before. But here there's some indication that they improve over time slightly. At best, kind of marginally significant success predicted by round and backward association strength predicted by round. And the same trend with all the other measures. It's kind of slightly going in the right direction, but nothing really convincing. In terms of interpretation, something seemed to make a difference in experiment 2. It's unclear what it was. It could be that the easier target items, the fact that they all had good clue words, made the strategy clearer. Could be the case that the increased feedback represented increased interaction. Personally, I think they just realized that they should use, or they could use, rarer clue words. We measured SIP value, which is a measure of frequency per million words, where 3 is 1 per million and 2 is 0.1 per million. So the lower the SIP value, the rarer a word is. So the idea that their success was explained by the heuristic that they learned to use rare clue words is supported by the statistics. So if we included clue word frequency in the statistical model, round no longer predicted success or backward association strength. And also SIP value over rounds was only kind of significantly declining in experiment 2 and not in experiment 1, as we can see here. So in experiment 1, there's not really a clear trend, but in experiment 2, it seems like they are gradually, very steadily giving rarer and rarer clue words. But regardless, it seems that active perspective taking is cognitively demanding, and the ability to use it adaptively seems limited when there's no other alternative means of succeeding. So obviously, we have some outstanding questions still. What exactly made the difference in experiment 2? Was it just clue word frequency, as I suggested before? Or was it something else? We would have to run more experiments to see which one of the changes made the real difference. Also, a conceptual issue: can you actually strip away all context, as we tried to do in these 2 experiments? Even here, they had still seen each other, and they were also in a university setting in a British American pop culture, which they used a fair bit, as when they had the target word director and they used Spielberg or Tarantino to get it. They also very eagerly used interaction history when they could. So if they had an unsuccessful trial before where they used a clue word that then coincidentally came up as a target word later, they would use that previous interaction to get it right the second time. And also, I'm really interested in individual differences in perspective taking. Why are some people better at this game than others? Why do some people think that Latin is a good clue word for pig, when clearly it will just elicit something like classics? And why do some people use spelunking for cave while other people use bat and it doesn't work out? Yeah. Regardless, I think these 2 experiments show something really interesting about perspective taking with as little context as possible, and that it's kind of really hard to use it as a mechanism on its own. So thank you for listening. These are our Twitter handles. Please get in touch afterwards, and I'll leave this here for a few seconds.